Hey everyone, it's Sam. Today we're going to be talking about creating a deck of cards with just plain CSS, JavaScript, and HTML. It's all going to live in a single file, and we're going to see how web components work, which is going to make it composable, reusable, like you would get with something like React. But we're going to use it just with plain, web technologies that work in 2024, and we're just going to show how far you can really get without using any sort of frameworks with just the basics of the browser and what you can use. As you can see, I finally got a little room to make my videos in, so I'm excited about that. I'm excited to bring you more. So anyway, let's dive in and check out how it works. Thanks. So I wanted to jump in and show you sort of the end product at the beginning, just to see sort of what we're building towards. It's just a matching game where you can flip over cards and you can match them and get points, and then you can play against someone else locally. And this is all inside of a one HTML file with all the JavaScript and CSS. And so we're eventually going to get there, but we're going to start at the very beginning, looking at how to set all this up. So I look forward to doing it with you. Let's go. Okay, so let's figure out how all of this is fitting together here. So we just have a plain directory here. There's nothing fancy here, just one index.html file, which will be automatically served. And then you can serve this using any server you want that just serves static files. There's plenty out there. I use Ruby, so I'm using Ruby run this HTTP D thing, which uses WebRick port 8000, and it's running here. And you can just come here and you'll see this index file is being loaded, which I just have this plain card table which I made. So let's check out the index file. So there's nothing fancy about this. It's just HTML, and this is plain CSS. So we're going to walk through sort of how all of this works. And so for some of you it might be a little bit boring, but I think it's just sort of interesting to look at where the web is now and sort of understand how a lot of this stuff works. For example, CSS variables work, and you could add it to the root element here. So I've just created a bunch of colors here that I've picked up online, just a random color picker that to me looked like a card table. So I have the felt color, the wood is the sort of the surrounding area here, and then black cards, red cards, which we'll get to later, but right now we just have this set up. I do a little reset here on the stylings. Just the box sizing is border box, which means that the CSS is calculated, the size of an element is calculated, including the padding and margin, and makes it easier to sort of get things to look nice. And we just set margin 0, border 0, everything to a nice starting spot. The body is position relative so that we can move things around relative to the card table here, relative to the body. We'll use more relative elements with the cards and things, and we'll explain that a little bit more as we get going. And then for the table, I just want it to be 100% of the browser, so 100% of the height, the VH, and this is percent virtual. I think virtual, is that what it stands for? I'm not sure. And the width here, so 100%, 100%. So that means like if we adjust it, it's always going to be the table for as long as we're working here. And the background color is the felt, and then we have the border, which is the wood. So like maybe we want to make the wood border like a little bit bigger. We can just save and reload here, and everything's working nicely. It's a little bit too big for me. I go back to 5, and then it's going to all be working. And let's see here. And, border radius, I don't know. I don't think we need this. And then the box shadow, I just added a little shadow here. It's hard to see, but it just adds a little shadow around the edges. It makes it look like there's some light coming in, just gives it like a tiny little bit of a 3D effect. So, that's sort of just how to set up like a full screen area in HTML and CSS. And from there, we're going to work on adding cards. We're going to build cards. And then once we have a card that we feel like it looks good, then we'll turn it into a web component and go from there. So let's start with that. Okay, so I created what I call workroom, which is just like, sort of like a workbench, just a nice plain white background so that I can see sort of what the cards look like. I created some of the styles here, but I'll explain them in a second. But the workroom is just a absolute positioned item, and I centered it with the top left 50%, and then you just move it back. Since top left is the corner, if you don't have this transform section here, then you can see that it'll be sort of on the side here because the top left corner will be in the exact center. And then we just need to translate the X position and the Y position by 50%, and then that's going to give you a centered item here. So we can see now it's centered perfectly, and then I just have it be half of the width, half of the height. So it moves obviously as well. You can change that if you want. And I just want this to be on the top, so the z-index is 100. It could be anything. 10 is fine, probably. 100's a little bit of an overkill, probably. And then, so it's on top of the table. And then all the items inside I want to be centered in the middle of this. So we use Flexbox to align the items in the center, justify content. We'll get the content centered and then align items. Since Flex by default is the rows, is by rows, so align items center is going to do the X position correctly, and then the justify content will do the Y position centered correctly. And that's all we need for the workroom. So what's our first step for the card? Our first step for the card is creating the actual card. So let's look at that first with HTML, and then I'll add in all of the items like the number and stuff like that. So let's just uncomment out this for now, and then comment out this portion, and we can see that a card shows up. Now the card is just a plain div here, and we can check out, we're going to be using fonts, different font colors, obviously for the numbers and for the background color of like the spades, the clubs, for example. But right now we have, we can ignore this for now, and I'll explain it in a second. But we have the card as a position relative, which means we want the card to be sort of a container for the elements inside, and then we can position all of the elements relative to the card. So the card is, you can think of the card as a container, and then if we have the numbers and the suit and everything inside, we can position it based on where the card's location is, which is going to make it easier. I have it with 8.5 by height 12. This is based on the card, actual card dimensions, or the ratio of actual card dimensions, and I just picked it because it looks sort of nice. We could do a size and then do like a calculation to get the correct width and height, but for now this is fine because I think it looks pretty good. We just rounded the border as cards have, let's just look up a playing card here. Let's do bicycle. Bicycle playing cards. And let's just look at an image here. As you can see, like the corners are rounded, and the it's a white background with the card, suit and number in the top left corner, and then flipped at the bottom. And so we're going to do something similar with our cards, and the design in the middle won't be so elaborate, but also you can add any images or whatever that you want inside the middle. I'll add all this code to a public GitHub repo, and you can play around with it if you want. So we have the rounded corners, which I think looks not bad. Maybe it's a little bit too big. We can add a let's add a border so that we can see exactly where it is, which will make it a little bit easier to see. And so this is just a 1 pixel border, solid, and the color is black. And we can see it shows up there. Black is a little bit too, strong for these cards. Obviously, a real card doesn't have a border at all. So we'll probably remove this border once we place it onto the table. But for now, it makes it a little bit easier to see. And so maybe let's reduce this to 5 and make it a little bit better. And maybe 10 was okay. Anyway, you can play around with this. And then, so this gives us a card. And so we have sort of the card working out the way we want. Just change this to light gray for now. And then we can see that we add a little shadow here just to give it a little bit of a depth. Maybe the shadow's a little bit too big. So let's just do like a 1 pixel shadow here. And yeah, that gives us sort of a nice card, but that's okay. We're all set up here. The background color is this ivory color that I made up top. It's a little bit different than white, but it gives us sort of that playing card feel. And you could probably add like a texture or something to make it look more like the playing card. But anyway, what we now want is like the numbers and then the suit. So we'll see how this font color comes into play later. Okay, so now that we have the card set up, we can start adding the numbers and the suit. So we have the club set up here. It looks a little bit big maybe right now, but we have the number and the club inside this identity element. And the identity element is basically just going to, help control like the identity is what I'm calling the club and the, number, the sort of identity of the card. And so we have it positioned with X, Y here and top left absolute positioning based on the, based on the card. So the card has the relative positioning and then the identity element has the absolute positioning. And so you can see that it's inside here, X, Y, and obviously we could update this if we wanted it to be more inside. Then we could see like moves, 10's good. And so for now, this is how it fits, like right in the middle there, sort of the top and the left, and it brings it sort of in nicely. And the 10 was better, so it's up there. And maybe the number is a little bit big. Let's reduce the size here. And you can see that the number is going to just be the number element, and then the club icon is going to be down here. So club icon, how does this work? Let's just look at the HTML first, and then we'll go to the CSS. So the club icon is, it's a component that's comprised of 3 ball elements that I'm calling, maybe not the best name in the world, but anyway, and then the stem, which is just the bottom there. And so how does this work? Well, we could do something a little bit fancier with like before elements and after elements, but honestly, I think this is sort of nice to see how it works if you want to go with this sort of plain, sort of easy to understand approach. And we're going to abstract this out later when we use the web components, but I think it's important to understand how it works first with just the HTML and the CSS. And then that's going to give you like a good understanding of how it should look when it's, more abstract. So we have this club icon. So we have the club icon. It's going to have a size, which is going to be the top level element, and then it's position relative, so that the little the balls and the stem sort of fit together into the nice club icon as we're creating it here. And that means that every element inside is going to have the absolute positioning, and then we're going to move it around based on different widths and heights. We use, again, we're using CSS variables here, which means that we can actually make all of this calculated based on this initial size element. So for example, like I want this to be half a rem here, and then we just update it, and the entire element changes, and that's due to the fact of how we built it. So if you have one of these ball elements, border radius is going to make a circle, 50% is going to make a circle. With height, we're based on the size before. The background color is going to be the same color as all the black cards, and then the position is going to be absolute. And then we calculate some extra variables that we can use later based on the size. We want to have the offset be half on both sides. So we have the offset as half, and then we have offset -1, which is just the negative offset, which just takes the initial offset and then multiplies it by -1. This calculation, this is just all built into CSS. You can do math calculations here, and you can use variables inside of these calculations. So we could actually make this half a variable as well and modify that, but for now this is easy enough. And then that means that each of the individual elements here are going to just use these offset elements to position themselves based on the club icon class, which is the top level class. So there's nothing so fancy about it. We're just moving one left, down, and left, and another one down and right. That's what these are doing. And then the stem portion is going to also have absolute positioning. And we're going to reuse this offset here. We could actually put all this offset stuff up into the club icon variable here and reuse it down all of here. So let's do that actually, and then we can have it just calculated once. And then we can reuse it, and you can see this is still working. And so the width and the height, this is just a rectangle. It's not anything super fancy. And the background color is the same. And the top left, we're just changing the calculation here because we want it to be in the center. So the left is 0.25, and then the top is just down by 2. So anyway, as you can see, that gives us something that is going to be able to change based on size. So if I updated this to 7.75, you would see a change here. But another thing that it does nicely is it allows us to create a single class, like a large class, and change the size dynamically. So we just have this large class. All it does is change the size to 1 rem. I'm not sure what the right way to say that is, but and so if we go down to the club icon and we add large, then we can reload and we can see that it dynamically updates based on only changing that single variable. Just really nice way to like style things and have them be different sizes, etc. So we don't need it to be large because right now it's just fine the way that it is there. So that's perfect. Now let's move on to just adding that flipped element at the bottom, which is going to be really easy to add too. Okay, so let's create a flipped element to be in the bottom right-hand corner that's flipped and turned around. So let's just copy and paste this identity. And again, we will make this a little bit more dry later, but for now it's just easier to see this. So we can just copy and paste this exact same thing and then add a flipped class. What do we need in a flipped class? Let's look. So as we saw before, we use these x, y variables here to sort of do the offset from the top corner. And honestly, we could just do 1 since it's the same right now, but maybe we want to move it a little bit more on the left, and it's as opposed to the top. But for now, that's fine. So before, as we said, the top was the y value, left is the x value. So to do the flipped, all we need to do is reset the top left value. You can just set it to auto here, and that's going to basically sort of reset the value and make it calculated based on the other variables, which we're going to set as bottom and right. So bottom and right is going to be the same. And then all we're going to do is transform is going to flip it around in using the transform rotation of half of a turn. Half of a turn means turn it halfway, which is going to flip it all the way around. And that's going to give us this guy down here. That's exactly what we want, which is the upside down one. So right now we have a pretty nice looking card. Maybe you want to add some extra elements in the center, like 7 little clubs. And we can add that later with JavaScript. It's going to be a lot easier to do things like adding, dynamically generated elements. But for now, this looks nice. This looks like a good card. So let's move it out of the workroom. Let's get rid of this workroom for now. Actually, let's just move the workroom here by itself, and then just remove this down here. And then we're just going to push this. We're going to put this element on inside the table, and let's just comment out the workroom for now. And we're just going to look at it on the table. Ah, there it is on the table. Looks pretty good. And we're going to be able to now dynamically generate a bunch of them by making a web component, and that's called card. And then we're going to be able to dynamically generate these using templates. And then we will create the other suits like diamonds, hearts, and then we'll be able to create our little matching game, which is going to be the goal of creating this sort of table here. So let's check that out next. Okay, so I've gone ahead and turned the card into a web component, and I'm going to explain to you the steps to do that yourself. So just to show you how it looks at the end, we have this component we've made. It's a special custom HTML component called playing card, which gives you a value and a suit. So this means that we can now create as many cards as we want, and we can change the value, ace, 2, 3, and all clubs. I haven't gone ahead and done any of the other suits yet, but we will in a second. And so now you can see that they pop up as cards. Some of the, vertical styling isn't perfect there yet, but we can always fix that later. But basically, this gives you playing cards on top of a table, and I'm going to show you how exactly you can make your own web components to do just that. So HTML has the concept of templates, which are just HTML that you write that you can use later in JavaScript, but it doesn't get rendered automatically. So what we want to do is we want to take everything that is needed to create a playing card and put it into the template, and then we can reuse it into our web component. So you just need this template element, and then I've pulled out the styles so they live inside the template. So the way that web components work is they actually create their own DOM. It's called a shadow DOM, and it means that it can be encapsulated and used into various websites without affecting the other elements on the page. So that means that it has its own styling, it can have its own JavaScript. It's basically like its own little web DOM inside of the bigger, browser DOM. And so what we want to do is bring all the styles in and put them inside the template so that they're used for the playing card. And you don't need to do it like this. You could hypothetically, you could move the styles out and then not use the shadow DOM, but I want to show you how it works with the web components in the DOM. So you could put all this in one file, and then you could include this in any page that you wanted to use cards on, and then you could just reuse the same components over and over again. So it's really nice sort of encapsulation and way to keep things, non reusable. Sorry, is the word I was looking for here. So none of this styling has changed. I just copied it down inside of this template element, as you can see here. Let me make this bigger. Sorry. So you can see that the template element is right here, and we copy the style, and we're going to get to the other cards in a little bit, but essentially nothing's changed here. I did add a display flex direction column so that I can sort of style the way that these elements look when to try to even them up, which we'll get to later. And then for the actual HTML, I actually removed a lot of stuff. So, and I added some comments just so that we know what's going on here. But you can see that we have the class, the card suit, and we have which we want to be able to give our specific suit class to at the end. And then the identity class, which we already talked about. And then I removed the icon to add value here. Sorry, I don't really need this. And we want to add the icon here, which is going to be the icon for the club that we talked about before. So I also made the club its own template, which means that I can encapsulate the styles there too and use it as well as its own little template element, which makes it easier to reuse. So we'll create a template for club, spade, heart, and diamonds at the end of this. So right now we just have this club icon template. I'll add the other ones in a second. It's not super exciting, just some CSS. And I'll show you how that works once we get there. But I want to come down here to show you how actually the web component part works. It's really not very complicated. We just create a class, extends HTML element, and we want to call super here to set up everything that we need in the browser. So that should always be the first element here. We want that to, call should always be first. And the connected callback is the callback that happens when the element is actually loaded and everything's ready on the page. I had a little console log there to do some debugging. And all you need to know is that we need to attach the shadow DOM. The shadow DOM is going to be what we talked about, which is going to hold all of the elements inside of it. And open means open so that we can manipulate the JavaScript here. And with JavaScript, we can manipulate the elements on the page because we're going to end up wanting to create a game class that controls all of these cards and creates them dynamically at the end of this. So we want to be able to manipulate the inside with JavaScript. So that's the mode open. If you did closed, then the outside JavaScript wouldn't be able to manipulate the inside, and for our purposes, not really useful. But if you wanted to encapsulate something, it could be useful for you. So how else does it work? So we use this get attribute data value, which you saw earlier is just going to have like the value of the card, and then the club, the suit is club, which we'll see in a second. And then we have the suit, so we have the value in the suit, nothing too mind-blowing there. And then what we want to do is grab the template. So I have the IDs for the playing card template that we saw earlier and the suit icon template. And I'm just using some string manipulation here to get the suit template that we need, because I'm going to have, clubs, diamonds, spades as before. All we need to do is just grab the content from inside of the templates. That's going to give you basically HTML elements to work with, and we'll clone them and attach them in a second. So for every identity element, identity as we saw before, we have these two identity elements, right? Identity and identity flipped, and they each have a number class, and we want to put the number in there, and then we want to append the icon. So let's go back to identity. And so we're querying all the identities, we're looping through them, we're getting all the elements, we're setting the number to the value. The value was just this card value here. And then we're appending this suit content, which is the icon, to the identity, which we had before. And then we're just appending the whole thing to the shadow DOM here. We're using clone node. Clone node just clones the element because we're going to want to be able to reuse this over and over again. Obviously, we're not trying to move the template in here. We want to reuse the template. And then true just means this does a deep clone, so that means it clones everything inside. And that's all it takes to create the web element of the card itself. And then all you have to do is define it on the page. Custom elements is a class is a variable that you can use from the browser here. So we can just look at here, custom elements, and you can see it's a custom element registry. And then that's going to allow us to define new elements on the page. So we defined ours as playing card, and then we pass it the card class, which is what we created here. And that's going to give you a custom playing card element that is controlled by these items inside of here. So there's the connected callback, there's also disconnected callback, and a few other ones where you can actually observe changes and do modifications. Right now, we don't need any of that, but we're going to want to flip it over and then remove it from the page eventually and stuff like that when we're doing our matching game. But right now, this is all we need, playing card, to define playing card and give it this. And then that means that we can use playing card, the playing card class, as you can see here, and we can add as many as we want. And then also we're going to be able to add them dynamically with JavaScript, which is what we're going to want to do when we're creating our game. So right now it's like 5, and we can add more, and you can see that they're added to this. And it's not working exactly the way we want it to yet inside of the table, but we will have it work exactly the way we want soon. So that is all we need. So I'm going to add the different card suits, the diamond and hearts and spades, and I'll show you that at the end. And then from there, we'll work on creating the actual game. So let's do it. So I just wanted to add a quick note. I made a small mistake here where I was cloning the node at the end, which actually was causing a problem because I was attaching the values to the template content and not actually the cloned one. So what we want to do is clone the content first, put that into the content variable, and then the suit content, also we want to clone that. And then we can update the number and icon from there. And that's going to give us a fresh copy every time that we create a card. So now we're back. We have all the suits working. We have club, diamond, heart, spade here. And I'll just quickly go through how I set those up to work. The exact same way as before with the club icon that we already used. I just created some new templates, spade icon, diamond icon, let me make this font bigger, diamond icon, and heart. Let's look at the diamond since that's the next one, and that's pretty easy. All we did was, same thing here, size, we control the size here, and then we just have it as a square, and then we rotate it 45 degrees, and there you go, that's a diamond. The only thing really interesting about it is we're using the red card variable here, and I think that's nice. And then let's check out the heart. So the heart's a little bit more complicated, but it's still not that complicated. We have a left and a right portion of the heart. each one is just a curved square, and we just combine them together to create a heart. You could use before and after pseudo classes, but again, I sort of like this because it's a little bit more explicit and just makes it a little bit easier for me to understand what's going on. These calculations aren't super interesting, just playing around with a little bit just to make it so that it looks like it has a nice sizing. So if I change it, it still looks good. And all we're really doing here is just adjusting the location, the size, the width, and the height. Background color, the border radius is, depends on the size. And then we transform it to turn it that 45 degrees. And then on the right side, we flip it. Again, the transform origin is used for where we're flipping it. You could change this to be something else, but then you'd have to change the left and the right. So you can look at that and play around with it and see how that sort of works. And then the spade is just a heart flipped on its head, and with a little stem at the bottom. The stem's looking a little weird. Let's update that. There we go. That looks like it's centered. But this left and right are the same as the heart. It's just flipped in the opposite direction because it's upside down, and the border radius is on the bottom as opposed to the top. And we flip the 45 degrees from the origin on the inside as opposed to the origin on the outside. So instead of flipping it like this, we flip it like this, and then we have the stem there, and then there we go. Now we have all four suits and all the different values. So that means that with our playing cards, now we can add as many as we want. And right now, none of this is wrapping, obviously, or anything like that. And we'll get that working next. What we want to do next, actually, is we're going to create the game. So what we want to do is conceptually is flip all them over. So we'll have a backside that's maybe a different color or something like that, or has a little bit different pattern. And then we will make it so that when you click on one, it flips it over. And if they're two matching, then they match. And then you get a point, and then it goes to the other person's turn. So we'll see how that works after this. Okay, now that we have the actual cards, let's focus on making the sort of game aspect of it. So as you can see, I'm using JavaScript here to create cards randomly on the screen, and so that we can match. So for example, the king of spades and the king of spades is here. The two of spades and the two of spades is here, and the two of spades, two of spades here. I'm not, keeping track of duplicates right now. But anyway, these are just randomly put on the screen, and I just make sure that there's a match at each one. And I give it a number of cards, and then it places those on the screen. So let's walk through how that works, and then I'll show you a little bit. I'll show you also how we're going to do face down. And then the final step is just to add a little bit of scoring and, removing the elements when they match. So let's just walk through how this works. So this is all just inside the script tag at the bottom. We have our card. That's what we talked about earlier. And then we have the game class. So this is a new class I created. This is just vanilla JavaScript, nothing special here. So constructor is just going to run anytime we call new. So we're going to have player one, player two. We're going to keep track of how many matches they have. We're not doing anything with this now, but we will later. These are just the game player pieces. And then we create the cards. So ace, king, queen, jack, suits, club, spade, heart, diamond. And then from 2 to 10, we just create those cards. So now we have all the different styles of cards possible. And then we want to randomly generate the cards. So basically what we're doing here is creating an array. We want to generate 10 cards. If we want which ends up bringing 20 because every card needs to have a match, so it's going to be double. So if we wanted to just do 5 or something like that, we could do 5, and then it would only bring 5. If we wanted to do more, if we wanted to do 12 or something, then we could do that as well, and that would fill up the whole screen. But it's based on the current size of the screen, so we can adjust that, and then it'll put them out again. So all we're doing is looping through this for 12 cards. We're generating a card, we're pushing the game card onto here, and then we're using structured clone, which is just a browser, actually sort of a newer browser function here that just clones everything inside, does a deep clone of the element, so we can have 2 separate cards, but they're the same, have the same values. So what's gen card? Gen card is down here. All it does is pick a random suit, and it picks a random value, and then it returns the value in the suit, and that's it. If we wanted to maybe improve this down the road, we would keep track of, we could check to see if it's already inside of our list, and if not, or if it is, then don't do that one, do a different one. But right now, this is just for simplicity. We don't care if there's duplicates or not. It just makes the game a little bit more random, which I think is fine. And then once we have that, we have a matching pair of every card from here. Then we just shuffle them, and this is just using the Newth shuffle algorithm. And so all it does is it does one pass through all of the cards, and then it just picks a random index less than the current index and swaps it with that one. And so it just does a one simple pass through and does a shuffle on that. And that's all we really need for this. And so we have our shuffled cards, and now we just need to place them on the board. And so this is just a little bit of JavaScript. Nothing crazy here. Basically, we want to create a card, so we use put card. What we're doing here is just getting the offset width, offset height, which is just the width and height of the card that we're going to use to make these calculations for the layouts. We can check out the put card, which we're going to use in a second anyway. The put card is creating the playing card element. So since we have our custom element, you can just do create playing card, set the values dynamically, data value, suit, and we can get then the position. We want to change the position to absolute position because we want to be able to select the X, Y, and coordinates where we want to set them down. So the top is going to be Y, the left is going to be X, and then all we do is append child. So this is the table. This table is using this getter, and we're just selecting the table element, which is the green element, and then appending this as a child to that. Since everything's since the table is a relative position, then this is just all relative to that table. So I'll explain this face down thing in a second. But so the reason we're doing this, creating a card and then removing it at the top, is just to get the width and height of the card dynamically, so that if we change it later, we don't have to also change the JavaScript, which I think is helpful and nice. So all we do is remove it afterwards because we don't need it. It's just the ace of spades. But we just want to, get these values here. And then the width and height of the screen. Then the items per row, items per column. That's going to tell us how wide and how tall we can go for each element. And we just use the floor so that we don't have any overflow errors here. And then let's check here. Then we're just going to go through every column, every row per column until we're out of game cards, X and Y. And we just calculate the x position as, you know, the current x, which would be the current row, times the card width. And then because we want to have a little buffer at the top and on the side, we add 10 here. And we did the same thing with the cards width and height to add this little buffer in between each card. So for example, if we remove this, then you could see that they're all sort of a little bit too tight together. So right here, we can just add, we add this little buffer so that it makes it feel like the width is a little bit more breathable there. So that's nice and good. And so we have the X position and the Y position. We grab the card for the placed item. So we're just going in a row. Placed item starts at 0. We add 1 to it at the end of the loop. So we just grab 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then we have all of the cards put. So we just use put card the same as before with the value, the suit, the X, Y position, and then we are done. And so you can see that we have 4, 8, 16, 24 cards here. And now we're ready to play the game. So all we need to do now is add maybe, now the board is all set up, we just need to flip them over so that obviously so you can't see where they are, and then add the mechanism for flipping them over when we click on them. That's going to be pretty simple, I think. So let's just do that right now. So to add the face down, I added a face down CSS class, which isn't anything special. It just adds a class called face down, and when it's applied, then it just has this blue background. And then we're going to want to add clicking, and when it clicks, flips over, and then if they match, show the match. If they don't match, then after 1 or 2 seconds, they flip back over, and then it's the next person's turn. So I'm going to get that working, and then we'll walk through how it works. Okay, we're in the final stretch of building this matching app. So we got everything working. We have player 1, player 2, and we have the game working so that when we flip cards, they either match or they don't match, and if they don't match, then they go to the next player. So you can see that it's working, and you can see that I'm not very good at it, but that's okay. So then we match one. There we go. Player 1 gets 1, and then it's player 1's turn to continue, and you see the game unfolding as player 1 is doing a lot better than player 2. And that's it. That's the game. It's all working. We have the cards. We're keeping track of the state here. Right now, if we restart it, if we refresh the browser, it will restart the game, which obviously isn't ideal. But you could take the state and put it in local storage and load it, which maybe we'll cover in a different video. But right now, let's go through how exactly this all works. So as we had before, we had the game constructor. I'm going to just show you quickly the scoreboard that we added here. It's not the most beautiful thing in the world, but it's pretty straightforward. We created a scoreboard with HTML, and we have player 1 who starts off as the current player, player 2, and their scores both start at 0. And then we have the current showing who the current player is. It's just a little box shadow that's red, and then the scoreboard has a nice little height and background color, and the player box is just a little box that we made with some padding. Nothing too crazy there. So let's look at the game class and walk through exactly what we changed and how it works. So as we were talking about before, we have the cards, and we have the current player, and we have a flipped card attribute, a state that we're keeping track of if a card is currently flipped or not. We start off with not, obviously, and flipping, we keep track of like when we're clicking this and we click 2, we want it to stay up for a few seconds just so that every player has a chance to see what's going on, and then you can't click other things while this is happening. So that makes it so that there's only 2 things allowed at once. And that makes it so that it's a little bit more seamless and things aren't getting into a weird state. Now we have the cards already that we created. We generated our cards here. You may have noticed I made the sizes a little bit smaller. And we have the shuffle, and we have the setup board. Setup board hasn't changed. We're doing the same things here. The only thing that we're adding here is this click listener. So all we're doing is using JavaScript, a normal JavaScript click event, and select card. So this is going to be where all the game logic really happens, because all we care about is when someone clicks, what's the state, and then how do we get to the next state. So let's dive into this select card function here. So select card, if card is flipped, or this dot flipping is the thing that we were using before, we just say it's an illegal move and we return. So what is card dot flipped? Well, card is a custom component that we made. So actually, we can add our own functions to it, which makes it really nice to use. So let's go look back at the card class. So this is the card class we created before. And we made it so that we can we can flip the card just by calling a function on top of it, instead of using instead of someone else having to understand like the way that the shadow root is organized and all that stuff. We can just create our own functions like flip, and then if someone calls it, then it'll do this function here, which is toggle the face down class that we created earlier. This is all the same here, but what we did was move out the value and the suit into getters. So getters allow you to do something like card.value, and we'll return the data.value. And again, we don't have to keep track of where we're saving it in data value, data suit, all those attributes. So we can also get a function, or sorry, a getter called flipped, which checks to see if we are containing the face down. If it contains face down, then it's not flipped, so we just need to do the inverse here. And if it doesn't have it, then it's open, it's flipped over, and that way we can keep track of, the cards can keep track of themselves whether they're flipped over or not, and then we don't have to worry so much about in the game constructor which card is which. We just need to know if it's flipped over or not. So let's go back to the select card function. So if the card is flipped already, then we don't want to be able to flip it back over, because once you flip a card in the game, you can't flip it back over yourself until your turn's over, or we're flipping, which is the flip animation, then we just do an illegal move and we return out of it. If the card is not flipped and we're not currently flipping, then we flip the card, which means we turn the card over. This is the state that right now there's no flipped card, so we flip it, this card flips up, nothing else happens because we don't have any current flipped cards. So let's check that out. So we'll bypass this and just go to this else statement here. If there's no flipped card and we flip the card, then this flipped card equals card. So how do we get the card in here? Well, we're using a closure. So in the event of, when we add the event listener, we're adding this function select card, and we're actually inserting the card into here. That way we can just keep track of it easily. Obviously, you could also just use the event.target attribute here, but what's the point of doing it twice if we already know that we're going to use the card? Let's just use the card itself and then not worry about having to use the event. So that's the state we're in right now. One card is flipped over. So that means that this flipped card is the next state that we want to get into. so the state that we want to get into here is we want to check if it's a match or not. How do we know if it's a match? Well, if the value is the same, for example, if 2 9s, and the suit is the same, so we want it to be a 9 of clubs and a 9 of clubs, that's the only time that it matches. So we're going to set this to flipping true, which means we are in the process of either showing the mistake, or we've got a match and we're going to update the score and let that player go again. So if there's a match, if the values are equal and the suit is equal, we add a little console.log here so that we can check it out. We say this.currentPlayer.matches plus equals 1. As we saw earlier, current player is just a player object which just has matches object here, which is super easy to keep track of. Doesn't have to be anything fancy. Get rid of that console log, and then we set the score. And so what does the set score do? Well, it just updates the HTML. It grabs our scoreboard, grabs player's 1 score, updates it to player 1, and updates player 2. We could do like an if statement to check to see which one to update, but it's really doesn't matter at all because the value, really doesn't take that much time to do. So we can just do both at once. So go back to set score. And then what we want to do is if there's a match, we want to have just this is 500 milliseconds here, just to show the match because human beings need a little time to process information. So what we want to do is wait 500 milliseconds and then run these commands. The commands are removing both the cards because it's matched, so we don't need that anymore. This remove is just the JavaScript HTML element remove function, which just removes it from the DOM. So we can remove the card, we can remove the flip card. We set flipping to false once we're done so that we can keep playing the game. And then we set the flip card to null because we are on a new round. So that's all that's there. And then if there's no match, we hit we go to a miss. Same thing here, we do flipping true. Actually, we already said that up there. We don't need this. Just get rid of that. And like we said before, give the players some time to see the flipped cards. So I update this to a whole second. That gives the other player a chance to try to memorize where the card is. So if it's a miss, we switch the turn. Switching the turn is just an if statement here. If current player equals player 1, then we switch to player 2. If current player is player 1. And then we just toggle the current class so that there's an indicator to our users which player is playing. So then we flip the card. We flip the cards back over. Both the flipped card and both the initially flipped card and this flipped card, we turn them back over because we didn't have a match. Flipping is false. Flip card equals null, and that's it. So what you have here is a full game. It's let's see what this is. About 560 lines of code that I wrote today, and it's just all one file. HTML, JavaScript, CSS. It's all vanilla. You can run this in any browser, any modern browser that supports web components. And yeah, I think it's pretty cool. So check it out. Thanks for watching the video about setting all this stuff up. I had a lot of fun building this, and hopefully you had some fun watching it. Please feel free to subscribe and you can see more content. Thanks.